It's Vols and Bucks in the shoe, with the winner earning the right to face the Ducks in the Rose Bowl. But before one of these teams gets to enjoy the warmth of LA, they got to get through the first game ever played at Ohio Stadium in December. It'll feel like it. Temperatures in the teens. That's what we call football weather. But we did simulate this game 20 times on the video game, and Tennessee won it 15 of those times. Certainly Vegas not agreeing with that, though. Let's welcome in Patrick Brown of GoVols 24/7 and Dave Biddle of Bucknuts.com. And we're going to start with the matchup of the game, I think, with Ohio State's offense versus Tennessee's defense. So, Dave, how will this Buckeyes makeshift offensive line still find success against a really good Tennessee defensive front?
That's going to be the story of the game, in my opinion, because Ohio State's offensive line is depleted, and they're now breaking in their ninth starting offensive lineman of the season. Luke Montgomery, a sophomore, is expected to start at left guard. He'll be, again, the ninth offensive lineman to start for the Buckeyes this year. A football team's going to be lucky to get through a season with their starting five offensive linemen, but you don't expect to be down to your ninth offensive lineman. And the bad news for the Buckeyes is they're facing a Tennessee defensive line that's fantastic. So if Ohio State can just have a stalemate, they'll be very happy with that. I don't know if that's possible. It's definitely weakness against strength when you look at Ohio State's offensive line versus Tennessee's defensive line.
Certainly, Dave. I think if you're Tennessee and you're looking for a path to victory in this game, one of those paths is the defensive line dominating this game. Tennessee certainly has the personnel to do it. They go 10, 11, 12 deep at times. They're 6 deep at defensive tackle without much of a drop-off. And really, this defensive line has been sort of the spearhead for this defense that's played really well all season. They're top 5 in scoring defense and total offense. They create a lot of havoc with that defensive line, a lot of tackles for loss. I believe they're 3rd in the SEC. You've got some big bodies up the middle that can get in the backfield and make plays against the run. They've got some athletic guys off the edge that can get after the quarterback too. And really, the depth has been such an advantage for Tennessee all season because it's almost like a different guy pops up to make a big play in a key moment in every different game. So certainly James Pierce is going to be maybe the headliner, and obviously they've got all those big defensive tackles. But as you mentioned, Dave, if Tennessee's going to be able to win this game, they've got to dominate that lineup, that offensive line of Ohio State that's got some different guys coming in. You go back to that Georgia game that Tennessee lost a few weeks ago. Their defensive line was neutralized in that game. No sacks, really no impact on the game. Carson Beck was able to make a lot of plays down the field to his receivers. So Tennessee's defensive line is going to need a really good game if Tennessee's going to advance in this matchup.
Using a lot of players on the defensive line, good thing. Having to use a lot on the offensive line, not a good thing. Let's go to the other side. UT offense versus this Ohio State defense, also a great unit. And Patrick, maybe Josh Heupel offenses in the past would have trouble in the cold, but this seems like a very different offensive unit. So what's the key to this year's Tennessee offense finding success?
Well, Emily, we talked about the defense and the defensive line being such a key part to the way Tennessee's gotten to this point. The other part's Dylan Sampson, the SEC Offensive Player of the Year, has set Tennessee single-season rushing records for yards and touchdowns. But in this game, I think Nico Iamaleava in the passing game really have to show up. They have to provide balance against an Ohio State defense that's allowed the fewest yards in total defense and scoring defense as well. So big plays are going to be extra valuable in the cold. Tennessee's got to be able to consistently get all components of the passing game working. They've just been a little bit off for so much of the season. That's probably the thing they've done the most consistently. But Nico Iamaleava played a lot better during the final month of the season. His passer rating really soared after a 3-game sort of lull where he really looked like a freshman going through the SEC for the first time in October. And Tennessee's wide receivers were pretty beat up for most of the season with Brew McCoy, Dante Thornton, Squirrel White all playing through injuries. They had some guys step up in that playoff clincher against Vanderbilt, but so the time off should help some of those guys be a little bit fresher. And Thornton's a guy that's averaging, I think, 25 yards a catch. He's made a lot of big plays this season. They're going to need to hit some of those to complement Sampson. We know what you're going to get from him. He's the best running back in the SEC. He's had an amazing season. The offensive line has been really physical. This is the second year in a row that Tennessee's led the SEC in rushing, but you can't be one-dimensional against a defense with as much talent and experience as Ohio State's.
Yeah, if Ohio State's going to make a run in this thing or just beat Tennessee, the defense is going to have to carry them because the offense is decent, but the defense is the strength of this Ohio State team. Number 1 total defense in the country, number 1 scoring defense in the country, as Patrick just articulated. And, they know very well that Tennessee plays at a very fast pace, the fastest pace in the country. And, Jim Knowles, Ohio State's defensive coordinator, says Ohio State is built for that. Their defense is built. They call themselves the fastest play calling defense in the country. And he says that goes back to his days working under David Cutcliffe, who made his name obviously at Tennessee as a coordinator, when Knowles was at Duke under Cutcliffe. And They wanted to have the fastest play calling defense in the country, and they believe they did at Duke. He took that with him to Oklahoma State. He's taking that with him to Ohio State. So they haven't faced that many up-tempo offenses this year, Oregon being an exception to that rule. And they say nobody does it better than Tennessee. And they're more balanced, I think, than a lot of fans believe. So, can Ohio State limit big plays in this game? They know Sampson's going to get his yards. But, can they limit the big plays? That's what killed them against Oregon. And overall, this defense has played excellent this year. The one thing that they need to really focus on, though, is getting pressure on the quarterback. That's the one thing. The sacks haven't been as good. They've been better the second half of the season for sure. But getting more pressure on the quarterback, getting off the field. If Ohio State can force some 3-and-outs, that's going to be huge in this game.
Tempo feels like a smart play to keep you warm in this one as well. All right, real quick, number one key to pulling out a win in this game. Dave, if Ohio State does what, they'll win this game?
If the offensive line can play decent, I won't even say well. The offensive line can play like decent. If we don't walk away from this game saying, wow, Ohio State's offensive line got destroyed, then I think the Buckeyes have a good chance. If Tennessee's defensive line did what Michigan's defensive line did, Ohio State's offensive line, it's going to be a long night for the Buckeyes. And it's just exciting. I mean, having a playoff game here in Columbus at the Horseshoe with a brand name like Tennessee coming up here, it's going to be a lot of fun. So I think it's going to come down to that battle of Ohio State's offensive line versus Tennessee's defensive line.
Yeah, Dave, I think for Tennessee, it's just handling the road environment. You go back to both their losses this season were on the road in SEC play in night games. It's going to be a similar setting in the Horseshoe. Tennessee's never played there. They've got a former Buckeye and Andre Turrentine who said it's not as loud as the SEC. There's supposedly going to be a lot of Tennessee fans in the building. We'll see. But they've got to go there and they've got to execute. And a lot of people talk about, the offense being able to handle noise on the road. Their defense is they struggled in that Georgia game, and they struggled in some of the past road losses that Tennessee's had under Josh Heupel. So they've got to execute the little things really well. They've got to protect the quarterback, as Dave mentioned. And defensively, they've got to create havoc. They've got to come up with some turnovers. They've got to get Ohio State behind the chains and into third and longs and get off the field in those situations. Both teams are going to need to be getting red zone holds in a game where scoring could be limited in the cold and two offenses that have maybe sputtered here and there. So I think if you're Tennessee, you've got to protect Nico and you've got to maybe continue to do what you've done all season and create a bunch of havoc on defense.
It's the final game of the first round. Tennessee and Ohio State, thank you both so much for the great breakdowns. You can keep it locked into GoVols 24/7 for all things Tennessee football and bucknuts.com for everything you need to know about Ohio State.